The desert stretched in every direction, empty and unforgiving under the August sun. Heat shimmered off the asphalt in waves that bent the horizon into something fluid and uncertain. Three motorcycles cut through the stillness, their engines a low rumble that carried across miles of nothing. The road was straight and endless, the kind that made a person think too much or not at all. Margaret Torres, doggy to anyone who'd earned the right, kept her eyes on the white line ahead and tried not to think about what the cardiologist had said yesterday. Stage 3, maybe 2 years, maybe less. The words rattled around in her skull with every mile marker that passed. She was 58 years old and her body was betraying her one heartbeat at a time. The irony wasn't lost on her arm. 20 years as an Army medic patching holes in Marines and soldiers, keeping other people's hearts beating through firefights and IED blasts, and now her own was giving out in a slow leak she couldn't staunch. The bike's handlebars vibrated under her palms. She'd rebuilt this shovelhead with Elena 10 years ago, before the leukemia diagnosis, before the deployments that kept her away, while her daughter's hair fell out in clumps. Elena had loved this bike. Loved the roar of it, the way it made everything else disappear. They were supposed to ride cross-country together after Elena beat it. That was the plan. But cancer doesn't care about plans, and neither does the Army when they need you in Kandahar. She'd landed stateside 3 days after the funeral. 3 days. Her sister had to bury Elena without her because some colonel decided Maggie's skill set was mission critical. The guilt was a physical weight heavier than the leather vest she wore, heavier than the years. Ahead, Hank Cooper rode point, his bulk shifting with the curves in a way that looked effortless despite his 62 years. Former Marine built like he was carved from something harder than bone. His beard had gone completely gray, and the tattoos that covered both arms were faded from sun and time. She'd known him for 8 months, ever since she joined Iron Phoenix MC, looking for something that felt like purpose. He was a good man in the way that broken things can be good, useful, functional, held together with scar tissue and willpower. Carl Holloway rode sweep, keeping distance like he always did. Lean and quiet, the kind of man who saw everything and said nothing unless it mattered. He was 56 but looked older, the grief carved into the lines around his eyes. His wife Diane had died 2 years back, and he wore it like a second skin. He joined the club 18 months ago, same chapter as Hank, but there was something between them that neither one would talk about. Some history that made the air tight whenever they were in the same room. They weren't friends. They were people in the same place, riding the same road, running from the same kinds of ghosts. The Phoenix Children's Hospital charity ride was supposed to be simple. Show up, let the kids sit on the bikes, donate some money, ride home. Easy, painless. The kind of thing that made you feel like maybe you weren't completely useless. Maggie had signed up because it was something to do on a Saturday. Something that wasn't staring at the walls of her studio apartment and counting down the time she had left. The hospital parking lot was full of motorcycles when they arrived, at least 50 bikes gleaming in neat rows. Families milled around, kids pointing and laughing, parents herding them away from the hotter pipes. A banner stretched across the hospital entrance. Ride for recovery, thank you for your support. Someone had tied balloons to the light posts. They bobbed in the breeze, cheerful and bright, and completely at odds with the reality inside those walls. Maggie killed her engine and sat for a moment, helmet still on, watching through the visor as a little girl in the third-floor window pressed her face against the glass. Bald, maybe 7 or 8, the same age Elena had been when they started chemo. The girl was waving at the motorcycles, her smile wide and uncomplicated, the kind of joy that didn't know what was coming. The pain in Maggie's chest wasn't metaphorical. It was sharp and real, like something had torn loose inside. She fumbled for the nitro pills in her vest pocket, slipped one under her tongue, waited for the burn. The doctor had been clear, stress would kill her faster than time. Avoid exertion, avoid emotional strain, get your affairs in order. She swung off the bike and pulled her helmet free, shaking out hair that had gone from auburn to mostly gray in the past year. Hank was already surrounded by kids crouching down to their level, letting them touch the chrome. He was good with them in a way that surprised her, patient, gentle, like he was trying to make up for something. Carl stayed by his bike, adjusting mirrors that didn't need adjusting, checking oil that didn't need checking. Busy work. The kind of thing you did when you wanted to look occupied so no one would try to talk to you. A hospital volunteer approached him anyway, clipboard in hand, trying to engage. He gave her 3 words and went back to his mirrors. Maggie walked toward the entrance past the families, past the other riders who were laughing and taking photos. Inside, the hospital smelled like antiseptic and fear, that particular combination that takes you right back to every bad moment you've ever had in a place like this. The walls were painted in cheerful colors, yellows and blues, meant to distract from what was actually happening here. It didn't work. The pediatric oncology ward was on the 4th floor. Maggie took the stairs instead of the elevator because her cardiologist also said she needed to stay active, and the contradictions in medicine were something she'd stopped trying to reconcile. The stairwell echoed with her footsteps. Somewhere above, a child was crying. Somewhere below, a machine was beeping in a rhythm that meant someone's time was running out. The ward was full of parents who looked like they hadn't slept in weeks. Exhausted didn't cover it. These were people who'd been hollowed out and were still standing because they had to be. A nurse directed her to the common room where the kids who were well enough had gathered to see the bikers. 12 children ranging from maybe 5 to 15, all in various stages of treatment. Some had hair, some didn't. Some were in wheelchairs, some walked with the careful slowness of people whose bodies hurt in ways they couldn't explain. A boy with a breathing tube approached her first. Maybe 9 years old, dark eyes too big, in a face that was gaunt and pale. His mother stood behind him, one hand on his shoulder, the other wrapped around her own waist like she was holding herself together. The boy looked up at Maggie, taking in the leather vest, the patches, the scars on her forearm from shrapnel she'd caught in Fallujah. "Are you a real biker? Like dangerous?" His voice was small, threaded with hope and fear in equal measure. Maggie knelt down the movement, sending a spike of pain through her chest that she ignored. "Depends who you ask. Mostly I just fix things that are broken." "Can you fix cancer?" The question landed like a fist. She looked up at his mother, saw the desperation there, the way she was clinging to any possibility, no matter how absurd. "Nobody, I can't, but I can sit here with you for a while." The boy nodded, satisfied with that answer in the way children sometimes are. His mother whispered, "Thank you." "He's scared of everyone in scrubs now, but you look different. He feels safe." Safe. The word was a knife. Maggie had spent 20 years trying to keep people safe, and the scoreboard wasn't in her favor. Elena, the soldiers she couldn't save, the ones who died while she was elbow deep in their chest cavities, trying to hold their hearts together with her bare hands. Safe was a lie people told themselves. She sat with the boy for 20 minutes, talking about motorcycles in the desert and anything but the cancer that was eating him alive. His name was Josh. He liked dinosaurs and hated broccoli and wanted to be a paleontologist when he grew up. When, not if. He still believed in when. His mother, Sarah, sat beside them, crying quietly, trying to hide it. "I don't know what else to do. The treatments aren't working. They want to try something experimental, but insurance won't cover it, and we're already drowning in debt, and I'm failing him." "You're not failing him. You're here. That's what matters." "Is it because it doesn't feel like enough? It feels like watching him die in slow motion and pretending I'm doing something." Maggie didn't have an answer for that. She'd watched Elena die in slow motion too, except she'd done it from 8,000 miles away, through sporadic video calls that cut out mid-sentence. At least Sarah was here. At least Josh wouldn't die wondering where his mother was. She donated $500 on her way out. Most of her VA check. It wouldn't save Josh, wouldn't cure anyone, but it was something. Money always felt meaningless in places like this, a poor substitute for the miracles people actually needed. Outside, Hank was still surrounded by kids, showing them how the clutch worked, letting them rev the engine while he controlled the throttle. He looked up as she approached, and something in her face made his expression shift. "You good?" "Same as always." "Which means not good." She didn't argue. Hank had been a Marine long enough to recognize someone who was barely holding it together. They had that in common. Carl appeared from somewhere, phone in hand, face carefully blank. "We're cleared to head out. Route 87 north, stop for gas around mile marker 40. They mounted up. Engines roared to life, drowning out the hospital sounds, the crying, the machines that kept people alive when their bodies wanted to quit. The three of them rolled out of the parking lot in formation. Hank leading Maggie in the middle, Carl bringing up the rear. The families waved. The kids cheered. Josh was in a window somewhere watching them leave. Maggie felt the familiar pressure in her chest, the warning sign that meant she was pushing too hard. She ignored it. The open road helped. The wind and the speed and the way everything else fell away when you were moving fast enough. This was what she had left. Miles in forward motion and trying to outrun the clock. They rode for an hour before anyone spoke, just the three of them, in the desert, in the road that stretched toward a horizon that never seemed to get any closer. The sun was brutal, the kind of heat that made you understand why people didn't settle here until they invented air conditioning. Nothing grew except scrub brush and cacti, and even those looked like they were just barely hanging on. Hank's voice crackled over the comms built into their helmets. Gas stop ahead. Chevron station mile marker 42. Copy, Carl replied, his tone flat professional, the voice of someone who'd spent too many years in the army learning how to communicate without actually saying anything. Maggie didn't respond. Her chest hurt, and she was trying to regulate her breathing without making it obvious. The nitro pill from earlier had worn off, and she couldn't take another one this soon. The cardiologist's voice echoed in her head. Stage 3, congestive heart failure. Your left ventricle is functioning at 30% capacity. Another cardiac event will likely be fatal. You need to consider palliative care. Get your affairs in order. Affairs. Like she had anything to get in order. A studio apartment full of Elena's things that she couldn't bring herself to sort through. A bike. A leather vest with patches that meant something to the people who wore them, but nothing to anyone else. This was it. This was the sum total of 58 years. The gas station materialized through the heat shimmer like something out of a fever dream. 3 pumps under a faded blue awning convenience store with bars on the windows, bathrooms around back. One other vehicle in the lot, a blue Honda Accord with California plates parked 3 spaces from the store entrance. The kind of place people stopped because they had to, not because they wanted to. Hank pulled up to pump 2. Maggie and Carl flanked him, killing their engines in sequence. The sudden silence was oppressive, broken only by the wind and the distant hum of the coolers inside the store. Maggie swung off her bike legs, protesting the movement. She was reaching for the pump handle when she heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the desert quiet. Crying. Not the frustrated tears of a tired traveler, but something raw and terrified. She turned. A little girl was running across the parking lot, coming from the direction of the restrooms. Maybe 7 years old, pink backpack bouncing against her shoulders, 2 braids coming loose from whatever had held them in place this morning. Her face was red and streaked with tears, her eyes wide with the kind of fear that made Maggie's medic instincts kick in before her brain caught up. The girl was running toward them. Not toward the store where there were people and safety. Not toward the Honda that might be her family's car. Toward 3 strangers in leather vests standing next to motorcycles that probably should have scared her. She stumbled, nearly fell, and Maggie moved without thinking. 20 years of training, catching the child by the shoulders, steadying her, crouching down to eye level, before the conscious part of her brain registered what she was doing. The girl was gasping, trying to talk through tears and panic. Please, please, he won't leave me alone. Hank and Carl had shifted position, forming a loose triangle around them. Not crowding, just present, creating a barrier between the child and whatever had frightened her. Maggie kept her voice calm, steady, the tone she'd used on soldiers who were bleeding out and needed to stay focused. Who won't leave you alone? The man, he said he'd help me find my mom, but she's not lost. She's right inside. He keeps trying to make me go with him. The words spilled out in a rush, punctuated by hitching breaths. Maggie's pulse kicked up, adrenaline flooding her system in a way that made her damaged heart protest. She pushed the pain aside. Later, deal with it later. What's your name, sweetheart? Sophie. Okay, Sophie. I'm Maggie. This is Hank and Carl. You're safe now. Can you show me which man? Sophie's hand trembled as she pointed toward the restrooms. A man was walking toward them, purposeful, but not rushed. Maybe 40 average height, wearing cargo shorts and a blue golf polo tucked in at the waist. Sunglasses hid his eyes. New Balance sneakers. Wedding ring. Everything about him screamed suburban dad, the kind of person you'd pass 100 times and never remember. Sophie, his voice carried concern and relief in equal measure, perfectly calibrated. There you are. I've been looking everywhere. The girl pressed herself against Maggie's leg, small hands gripping the leather of her vest. I don't know him. The man reached them slightly out of breath, offering an apologetic smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Thank goodness. She wandered away from her mother. I was trying to help her find the right car. Maggie stood slowly, keeping herself between Sophie and the approaching man. She didn't change her stance much, but something shifted in the way she held herself. Hank and Carl adjusted their positions, too casual, but ready, the muscle memory of people who'd been in situations where seconds mattered. That's so, Maggie's voice was neutral, giving nothing away. Where's her mother? Inside, I think. I was walking back to my car when I saw Sophie looking confused. He reached out a hand toward the girl, and Maggie felt Sophie flinch against her leg. Come on, sweetie. Let's get you back to your mom. Carl spoke for the first time, his voice quiet but carrying an edge like a blade just barely hidden. Sophie says her mom's inside, says she's not lost. The man's smile tightened, just a fraction gone so fast Maggie almost missed it. Well, kids get confused. She was clearly upset when I found her. I wasn't confused. Sophie's voice was small, but firm, the kind of conviction children have before the world teaches them to doubt themselves. I went to the bathroom, and when I came out, he was there. He said my mom was in the wrong car and I should come with him to find her, but I know which car is ours. Maggie tilted her head, slightly studying the man. She'd interrogated enough detainees in Iraq to recognize someone working a script. The too calm voice, the rehearsed explanations, the way his eyes kept flicking between the three of them, calculating odds. Why didn't you just point her toward the store if you thought her mom was inside? I did. She didn't want to go. He didn't, Sophie interrupted. He kept trying to make me walk to the parking lot, the far end, where there's no cars. The temperature seemed to drop despite the desert heat. Maggie felt it in her bones, the shift from concern to certainty. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. The man's tone shifted, irritation bleeding through the concern. Look, I don't know what she's told you, but I'm trying to help. Kids make up stories when they're scared. Didn't make anything up. Sophie looked up at Maggie, her eyes pleading for belief. My mom's name is Dr. Sarah Chen. She's inside getting drinks. Our car is the blue Honda right there. She pointed to the vehicle 3 spaces down. The Honda with California plates. The only other car in the lot besides the man's vehicle, which Maggie now noticed, was parked at the far end near the restrooms, away from the pumps, away from the cameras that were probably mounted above the store entrance. Hank's voice rumbled from somewhere behind her. Well then, easy enough to verify. Let's walk inside together. Find Dr. Chen. The man's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. I don't appreciate being accused of something. Nobody's accusing you of anything. Maggie kept her voice even reasonable. Just want to make sure Sophie gets back to her mom safe. You understand? Something flickered across the man's face. Calculation. His eyes swept over the three of them, the vests, the stance, the way Carl had moved to a position that blocked the line of sight to the man's vehicle. He was measuring odds, running scenarios, deciding. Fine, but this is ridiculous. He relented too easily. That was the thing that made Maggie's instincts scream. An innocent person would be indignant, defensive, angry at the implication. This man just complied like he'd done risk assessment and decided to play along until he could slip away. They started walking toward the store, Maggie keeping Sophie close, the man slightly ahead with Hank and Carl flanking him. Not touching, not threatening, just there. The automatic doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Inside, a woman stood at the counter, paying for bottles of water and trail mix, early 30s, Asian slight build. She wore a medical conference lanyard around her neck. She turned at the sound of people entering her face, cycling through expressions in rapid succession, neutral, confused, terrified. Sophie! She dropped everything and ran, falling to her knees to embrace her daughter. The raw relief in her voice was something Maggie felt in her damaged heart. Oh my God, where were you? I came out and you were gone. I was about to call the police. Sophie was crying now, the kind of crying that comes after the fear passes and the adrenaline crashes. I went to the bathroom, and this man tried to make me go with him. Dr. Chen looked up, her eyes finding the man in cargo shorts. Her expression transformed into something fierce, protective, dangerous. Who are you? What did you do? Nothing. His response was quick, practiced. She was confused. I was trying to help. She wasn't confused. Maggie's voice cut through. Your daughter came running to us, said this man was following her, trying to get her to leave with him. Chen stood pulling Sophie behind her. The transformation was complete from terrified mother to something that would burn the world down to keep her child safe. I want to see your ID right now. I don't have to show you anything. This is harassment. Actually, Carl said quietly, and everyone turned. The clerk behind the counter, a teenager with acne and a chevron polo, held up his phone. Police are already on their way. Called them soon as I saw what was happening through the window. They said to keep everyone here. The man's composure cracked. His eyes darted toward the exit, but Hank had moved, blocking the door. Not aggressive, just standing there, 6'4", and immovable arms crossed over his chest. I didn't do anything. This is insane. I tried to help a lost child. She wasn't lost. Dr. Chen's voice was shaking with barely controlled rage. She knew exactly where I was, where she was. What were you planning to do? Nothing. This is all a misunderstanding. You approached her in the restroom area. Maggie's statement wasn't a question. Isolated spot. Told her she was confused about where her mom was. Tried to lead her away from witnesses. How many times have you done this? Carl's voice was soft, almost gentle. How many times? The man's face went pale, then red. I want a lawyer. I'm not saying anything else. Sirens were audible now, growing closer. 2 sheriff's vehicles pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing. 4 deputies emerged, hands near their weapons, as they took in the scene. The senior deputy entered first, a woman with gray streaks in her dark hair and eyes that had seen enough to not be surprised by anything. Someone want to tell me what's going on, doctor? Chen spoke first, words tumbling out. The conference, the quick stop. Sophie going to the bathroom, coming out to find her daughter gone, panic setting in, about to call 911 when they walked in. Sophie gave her statement next clear, despite her tears. The man approaching when she left the bathroom. His insistence that her mom was in the wrong place. How he tried to guide her toward the empty part of the parking lot. How she'd pulled away and run, seeing the bikers and something telling her they'd help. The bikers gave their accounts straightforward and factual. Times, positions, what Sophie had said, what the man had said. No embellishment, just the facts. The man in cargo shorts refused to speak beyond repeating his request for a lawyer. The deputy nodded slowly, her expression hardening. That's your right. She turned to her partner. Run his ID and I want to search his vehicle. You need a warrant. Actually, the deputy's voice could have frozen fire. I have probable cause. Attempted abduction of a minor, multiple witnesses. She looked at him hard. You can cooperate or we can do this the difficult way. Your choice. 20 minutes later, they found it, in the trunk of his silver Nissan Altima, hidden under the spare tire. Zip ties, industrial strength, still in the package. Duct tape, 3 rolls. Prepaid phones, 4 burners, still sealed. Children's clothing in sizes ranging from 4 to 10, both girls and boys. And a folder, thick with photographs. Deputy Morrison opened it with gloved hands. His face went pale. Dozens of photos, different children, different locations. Parks kids on swings, at slides running through sprinklers. Rest stops, families at picnic tables and parking lots. School crosswalks, children walking home alone. All from a distance. Professional zoom lens work. The children were unaware they were being photographed. On the back of each photo, handwritten notes in neat block letters. Times, dates, patterns. Soccer practice, Tuesdays 4 p.m. Walks home alone, Mondays, Thursdays. Mother works late Fridays. No father in picture. The deputy walked to the patrol car where the man sat in the back seat, handcuffed. Her face was stone cold. Robert William Patterson, you're under arrest for attempted kidnapping, possession of materials intended for use in a felony, and multiple counts we're still figuring out. She read him his rights in a voice that could have shattered glass. Dr. Chen held Sophie close, rocking slightly, tears streaming down both their faces. She whispered to Maggie, if you hadn't been here, if she hadn't found you. Her voice broke. She couldn't finish the thought. Didn't need to. She's a smart kid. She trusted her instincts. But she ran to you. Why I teach her to be wary of bikers, to find security guards, police officers, store employees. Maggie smiled slightly, the expression tired and sad and something else. Maybe she saw what she needed to see. People willing to stand. Sophie looked up from her mother's arms. You look strong, and you look like you'd listen. The words hit Maggie harder than she expected. Strong, she was dying one heartbeat at a time, held together with a medication and borrowed time. But to this child, she looked strong enough to run toward. You were brave, you did everything right. Hank and Carl stood by the bikes watching the deputies work. Hank was shaking, the adrenaline crash hitting him hard. Carl handed him water without a word. They didn't speak. The weight of what had almost happened sat heavy between them. Another vehicle pulled in 40 minutes later. An unmarked sedan, county plates. A man got out, 50s, graying hair, rumpled suit. He carried himself like someone who'd seen too much for too long and kept showing up anyway. A detective's badge on his belt. His eyes were the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. He introduced himself as Detective James Hartley, County Major Crimes. He spent 20 minutes examining Patterson's vehicle, taking photos, making notes. When he finally approached the bikers, his expression was grim. We've been tracking reports. His voice was quiet, meant for just them. Missing children along this corridor. Different jurisdictions, different timelines. Nobody connected them until now. He looked toward the patrol car where Patterson sat. You might have just broken open a case we've been chasing for 18 months. Carl spoke first. The photos. Those other kids. Hartley nodded. We're working on identifying them, seeing if any match our missing persons reports. He paused, the weight of something unsaid hanging in the air. If Sophie hadn't run, if you hadn't listened. He didn't finish, didn't need to. The sun was starting its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of amber and rose. Dr. Chen approached them one final time, Sophie at her side, holding her mother's hand tightly. I want you to know, Dr. Chen's voice was steady, controlled the voice of someone who'd spent years in medical school learning how to deliver bad news. I teach my daughter to be careful around strangers, to find security guards, police officers, store employees if she needs help. She smiled through her tears. I never thought to tell her to look for bikers. Hank's voice was gentle, softer than his appearance suggested. Maybe there's a lesson in that. Heroes don't always look like what you expect. Sophie stepped forward, pulling something from her backpack. A drawing done in crayon on notebook paper that was crumpled from being carried around. 3 motorcycles, 3 figures, rendered in simple lines and bright colors. One small girl between them. Above it, in careful letters that showed her tongue had probably been sticking out in concentration. My heroes today. Maggie took it, studying the details. Sophie had drawn her with red hair, even though it was mostly gray now. Had drawn Hank with his beard and Carl with his glasses. Simple, honest. The way children see the world before it teaches them to complicate things. This is beautiful, Sophie. Thank you. Will I ever see you again? The question was innocent, hopeful, the kind that cut deeper than knives. Maggie thought about her failing heart, about the time she probably didn't have, about how roads crossed and diverged, and most people you met you never saw again. Roads are long, they cross more than you'd think. But even if they don't, you remember something from me, okay? You trusted yourself today. You knew something was wrong and you acted. That's the most important thing anyone can do. Carl added quietly, you're already braver than most adults. They mounted their bikes as the last of the police work wrapped up. Patterson was being transported to county jail. The evidence was being cataloged and photographed. Sophie and Dr. Chen would give final statements at the station. The machinery of justice grinding into motion. The engines rumbled to life, a sound that meant freedom and purpose in equal measure. Where to now? Hank's voice crackled over the comms. Maggie looked at the highway stretching north, the endless ribbon of asphalt disappearing into the distance. She thought about Josh in the hospital, about Elena in the ground, about all the time that had run out while she wasn't paying attention. She thought about Sophie's drawing folded in her vest pocket, 3 heroes who were just 3 people who'd been in the right place and refused to look away. Home, but we take the long way. They rode through the twilight, 3 shadows against the darkening sky. Behind them, a little girl was safe because she'd trusted her instincts and because 3 strangers had chosen to listen. Ahead, the road stretched endlessly, full of possibilities and unknowns. Maggie's chest hurt with every breath, but she didn't slow down. Carl stayed steady in sweep position, his mind somewhere else processing something he hadn't said aloud. Hank led them north, his phone buzzing in his pocket with a message he hadn't read yet. Darkness fell fast in the desert. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in as many minutes. Stars emerged overhead, thousands of them, the kind of view you only got this far from cities and their light pollution. The road curved through canyons and across dry lake beds, through landscape that had been here long before humans and would be here long after. Maggie felt the familiar pressure building in her chest, the warning signs she'd learned to recognize. She eased off the throttle slightly, regulated her breathing, reached for another nitro pill. The third one today? The cardiologist had said 2 maximum. She was already breaking the rules and the ride wasn't even half over. Hank's voice came over the comms. Pull over ahead. Need to check something. They stopped at a scenic overlook, one of those turnouts where tourists pulled over to take photos of vistas they'd forget by the time they got home. No one else was there. Just the 3 of them and the night in the vast darkness of the desert beyond the guardrail. Hank killed his engine, sat there for a moment with his hands still on the handlebars. When he spoke, his voice was rough. My phone's been blowing up. My son, Travis, haven't heard from him in 5 years. He's been texting all day. Carl turned to interest flickering across his face despite himself. What's he want? Says he needs to talk. Says it's about his kid, Jacob. Hank pulled off his helmet, ran a hand through his hair. I didn't even know he had a kid. Never told me. Never sent pictures. Nothing. Maggie felt her heart do something irregular, a skip and flutter that made the world tilt slightly. She gripped her handlebars until it passed. How old? The kid 8, according to the texts. 8 years old, and I've never met him. The weight of that settled over them. 8 years of a child's life missed completely. Birthdays and first days of school, and all the moments that made up a childhood gone. You going to call him back? Carl's voice was neutral, like carefully so. I don't know. Every time I tried to be a father, I destroy something. My ex-wife, Travis, everyone I touch. That's not... Carl started, then stopped. The history between them was too complicated for comfort. Maggie spoke instead, her voice quieter than usual. I was deployed when my daughter died. Got back 3 days after the funeral. Spent 20 years telling myself the mission mattered more than being there, telling myself I was doing important work. She looked at the stars, at the endless dark. I was wrong, and now I'm out of time to fix it. Hank turned to look at her, really look, and saw what she'd been hiding. How long? 2 years, maybe less, hearts giving out. The silence that followed was heavy with things none of them knew how to say. Jesus, Maggie. It is what it is. Point is, Hank, you've still got time. You've got a son who's reaching out, a grandson you've never met. Maybe you destroyed things before. Maybe you can't fix them, but you can show up now. That's all any of us can do, show up when it matters, even when it's too late. Especially when it's too late. Carl spoke quietly. My wife died because I was working late, 20 minutes. If I'd left 20 minutes earlier, I'd have been there to pick her up like I promised. Instead, she drove herself and hit black ice and went off the road. He was staring at his hands at the wedding ring he still wore. I spent 2 years telling myself it was just bad luck. Wrong place, wrong time. But the truth is I chose work over her. I made that choice every day for 20 years, and then I ran out of chances to choose differently. They sat in the darkness, 3 people carrying weights that didn't get lighter with time. Hank pulled out his phone, looked at the screen. He wants to meet this weekend, says it's important. Then go, Maggie said. We're headed home anyway. What's a detour? I don't even know what I'd say to him. Start with hello, see where it goes from there. Hank was still staring at his phone when headlights appeared on the road below, coming fast. A sheriff's vehicle, lights flashing. It pulled into the overlook and Deputy Santos got out. Thought I'd find you here. Hartley asked me to catch you before you got too far. She handed Hank a business card. Detective James Hartley County, Major Crimes. A cell number written on the back in pen. He wants to talk to you. Tomorrow if possible. Says it's urgent. About Patterson. Santos's expression was grim. About what we found on his laptop. They cracked the encryption an hour ago. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Those photos in his trunk, we've identified 3 of them. 3 children who've been missing for over a year. Different locations, different circumstances, but all of them disappeared from places just like that gas station. All of them were last seen near rest stops or convenience stores on remote highways. The implication hung in the air like something physical. You're saying he's done this before. We're saying he might be responsible for a lot more than attempted kidnapping. And we're saying you three might have just broken open something that goes deeper than any of us thought. Carl leaned back against his bike, the analyst in him already working the problem. You need to cross-reference missing persons reports across multiple jurisdictions. Look for patterns, ages, locations, methods. If he's been operating for a year or more, there'll be a signature. That's what Hartley's doing now. But he wants to talk to you, all of you. Says there's something else, something he needs people he can trust. Why us? Maggie asked. We're not law enforcement. No, but you're people who showed up when it mattered, who listened to a scared kid when most people would have looked the other way. Hartley says that's harder to find than you'd think. Santos got back in her vehicle, started to pull away, then stopped, rolled down her window. Off the record, thank you for not just riding past. Most people would have. She drove away, leaving them standing in the darkness. Hank's phone buzzed again. Another text from Travis. Another plea to talk to me to try to bridge 15 years of silence and anger and abandonment. Maggie felt her heart do that irregular thing again, the skip and flutter that meant she was running out of time faster than she'd thought. She didn't tell them, didn't see the point. They had enough weight to carry. We should get moving, she said. Still got 100 miles before home. They mounted up, engines roared back to life. But something had shifted between them, some wall that had started to crack. They weren't friends. They might never be friends. But they were people in the same place riding the same road, and maybe that was enough. The miles unwound beneath them. Maggie counted heartbeats instead of mile markers, each one a gift she hadn't earned. Hank kept checking his phone at every stop sign, reading and rereading his son's messages. Carl rode in silence, but the silence was different now, less about walls and more about thinking. They reached the Iron Phoenix clubhouse just after midnight. A converted barn on the outskirts of Flagstaff surrounded by pines that made the air smell clean and sharp. Home, or as close as any of them had to one. Inside, a few members were still up watching late-night TV and drinking beer. They looked up as the three of them entered. How was Phoenix? Hank set his helmet on the bar, his movements heavy with exhaustion. Long, we'll fill you in tomorrow. But before they could head to their bunks, the TV news switched to a breaking story. A reporter standing outside a county jail, microphone in hand, serious expression. Robert William Patterson, arrested today in Gila County on charges of attempted child abduction, is now facing additional charges as investigators examine evidence found in his vehicle. Sources close to the investigation say Patterson may be connected to multiple missing children cases across Arizona and New Mexico. We'll have more on this developing story as information becomes available. The room went quiet. Everyone looked at Hank, Maggie, and Carl. That the guy from the gas station? Yeah, Maggie said. That's him. One of the members, a woman called Wraith, who'd been with the club for 20 years, stood up. You three need anything? Sleep, Hank replied. We need sleep. But sleep didn't come easy. Maggie lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, feeling her heart do irregular things in her chest. She'd spent the day saving a child, and it might have cost her whatever time she had left. Worth it. Had to be worth it. What was the point of time if you didn't spend it on things that mattered? In the bunk room next door, Hank sat on the edge of his bed, phone in hand, thumb hovering over Travis's number. Call or don't call, bridge the gap or leave it broken. Either way, there'd be consequences. Either way, someone got hurt. He pressed call. It rang 4 times. Then Travis's voice shaking, Dad. Yeah, it's me. Travis was crying. Hank could hear it in his breathing and the way his words caught. Sophie, oh God, Dad. Sophie was almost taken today. Sarah just called me. She said you were there. You saved her. Hank felt something in his chest crack open. I didn't know you had a daughter. You never told me. I know, I'm sorry. I kept her from you because I was angry, because I blamed you for everything, because I thought you'd hurt her the way you hurt me. Travis was full on sobbing now. And instead you saved her. You were there when I wasn't. You kept her safe. Travis. No, let me finish. Please, I need to say this. He took a shuddering breath. I hate you. I've hated you for 15 years. For choosing the core over mom. For being gone all the time. For coming back broken and angry and making everything about your pain. But today you were exactly where you needed to be. And I don't know what that means. I don't know how to feel about any of it. Hank's voice was rough when he finally spoke. I failed you. I know that. Failed your mother. Failed myself. I don't expect forgiveness. Don't deserve it. But I need you to know whatever I did wrong, however I hurt you, it was never because I didn't love you. I just didn't know how to be a father and a Marine at the same time. And when I had to choose, I chose wrong. You chose the mission. Every time. Yeah, I did. And I lost you because of it. Lost everything that mattered. Silence on the line. Then Travis quieter now. There's something else. Something I need to tell you about Sophie. What about her? Her last name, it's not Cooper. Sarah's ex-husband, he adopted her legally when we got divorced. Changed her name to his. Holloway. Sophie Holloway. Hank felt the ground shift beneath him. Holloway. Yeah, Richard Holloway. Why does that mean something? It meant everything. It meant the universe had a sick sense of humor. It meant his granddaughter carried the name of the family whose son he'd gotten killed in Fallujah. Dad, you still there? Yeah, I'm here. Hank's voice was barely above a whisper. We need to talk in person. This weekend, like you said. Okay, yeah, I'll text you the address. They hung up. Hank sat in the darkness, the phone still pressed to his ear, trying to process what he'd just learned. Sophie Holloway, his granddaughter, carrying the name of Marcus Holloway, the Marine who died following Hank's orders. Carl's brother. In the next room over, Carl couldn't sleep either. He was thinking about Diane, about the empty passenger seat, about 20 minutes that had defined the rest of his life. But he was also thinking about what Santos had said, about how they'd broken open a case that might have answers to questions he hadn't known to ask. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Detective Hartley. Need to meet tomorrow, 10 a.m. Silver City Diner. Come alone or bring your crew. Either way, I need people I can trust. This is bigger than Patterson. Carl shows the text to Maggie and Hank in the morning. They read it in silence, passing the phone between them. He said, come alone or bring the crew, Carl noted. He's giving us an out. Do we want an out? Maggie asked. Hank looked at both of them, these people he barely knew. These strangers who'd become something like teammates in the space of a single day. Yesterday, we stopped a predator from taking a child. That's good. That matters. But if there are more kids out there, then we keep going, Maggie finished, until we can't anymore. You're dying, Carl said bluntly. You collapsed yesterday. You're in no condition. I'm dying anyway. Might as well die doing something that matters. Carl turned to Hank. And you've got a son reaching out after 15 years. A grandson you've never met. You really want to spend what might be your last chance at reconciliation chasing monsters? Hank thought about Sophie's face, about her running toward them instead of away, about how close she'd come to being another name on a missing persons report, about all the things he'd failed at in his life and the few things he'd gotten right. My son said I always chose the mission. He was right. This time, maybe the mission and the right thing are the same. Maybe I can do both. Or maybe you'll fail at both, Carl said, but there was no heat in it, just acknowledgement of possibility. Maybe, but I'm done failing by doing nothing. They loaded their bikes at dawn. The ride to Silver City was 200 miles through high desert and mountain passes. They had 6 hours to decide if they were really doing this, 6 hours to talk themselves out of it or commit. They rode in formation, same as yesterday, but the silence between them was different now. Less about distance, more about contemplation. Maggie counted her heartbeats and wondered how many she had left. Hank thought about his son and his granddaughter, and the name Holloway, and what it all meant. Carl ran scenarios in his head, patterns and possibilities, the analyst's mind never resting. Silver City appeared through the morning haze. A town that had seen better days, mining operations shut down tourist trade, barely keeping it alive. The diner where Hartley wanted to meet was called Mabel's Kitchen, a place that looked like it had been serving the same menu since 1962. Hartley was waiting in a back booth, 3 cold cups of coffee in front of him. He looked like he hadn't slept. Maybe hadn't in days. They slid into the booth across from him. Didn't order, just waited. Hartley opened his laptop, turned it so they could see the screen. A map with red dots scattered across Arizona and New Mexico. 11 locations, each one a missing child, ages 6 to 11. Last seen at rest stops, gas stations, parks along remote highways. Patterson kept detailed records, encrypted, but the FBI's cyber team cracked them at 3 a.m. He's been operating for 18 months minimum. These are the children we know about. We think there are more. He swiped to the next screen. Photos, children's faces, school pictures, family snapshots, the kind of photos that ended up on milk cartons and missing persons flyers. 3 of Patterson's surveillance photos matched 3 of these missing children. Same kids, photos taken weeks before they disappeared. Maggie felt sick. You're saying he stalked them, planned it. We're saying he's methodical, patient, and he wasn't working alone. Hartley pulled up another file. Financial records, bank transfers, coded communications. Patterson has payments going to 2 other accounts. Regular deposits always after his surveillance trips. We're tracking those accounts now, but it's going to take time. Warrants, jurisdiction. How much time? Hank asked. Weeks, maybe months if the money went through overseas accounts. Carl leaned back. But you don't want to wait weeks. No, because Patterson's notes mention current operations, active surveillance, children he was planning to acquire. Hartley's hands were shaking as he typed. We've identified 4 locations where he was conducting surveillance in the past month. 4 potential targets who are still out there unaware they're being watched. He pulled up the locations, schools, parks, residential areas, places where children existed in daily routines predictable and vulnerable. We're coordinating with local law enforcement to put protection in place. But if Patterson's partners know he's been more arrested, they might accelerate their timeline. Grab these kids before we can stop them. Or they might vanish, go to ground, start over somewhere else. Maggie understood what he wasn't saying. You need people who can move fast. Who can get eyes on these locations without tipping off the partners? I need people who give a damn, who'll do what needs to be done, rules or no rules. We're not cops, Carl said. We're not qualified for this. No, but yesterday you saved a child because you paid attention and refused to look away. That's rarer than you think. That's what I need. Hank spoke quietly. What exactly are you asking us to do? Hartley looked at each of them in turn. I'm asking you to be in the right place at the right time, to watch when no one else is watching, to act when action matters. He closed his laptop. I'm asking you to help me find the children Patterson took and stop him from taking any more. The decision wasn't made with words. Maggie looked at Hank. Hank looked at Carl, and something passed between them that didn't need articulation. Hartley saw it, recognized the shift from consideration to commitment. Tell us what you need. Oh, Hartley pulled out paper maps, the old-fashioned kind, that predated GPS, marked with handwritten notes and coordinates. Patterson's files referenced 3 sites, not surveillance locations holding locations, places he kept children after acquisition before moving them to permanent buyers. He spread the maps across the diner table. Red circles marked remote areas far from main highways, far from help. First site is a ranch 40 miles into the desert southwest of here. Property records show it's owned by a shell company. No structures visible on satellite, but Patterson's logs mention it 17 times. Each mention correlates with a successful acquisition. Carl studied the topography, his analyst mind cataloging details. Access roads, 1 dirt track 12 miles off the main highway. No traffic, no cell coverage past mile marker 8. Second site, Hank's voice was steady, military flat, the tone of someone receiving a briefing. Abandoned gas station outside Van Horn, Texas. Similar setup, remote off main routes owned through layers of shell corporations. Patterson's logs reference it 9 times over the past year. Maggie traced the route with her finger. That's 3 hours east. Different state. Different jurisdiction, Hartley confirmed, which is why this case fell through the cracks for so long. No single agency was looking at the pattern. Everyone was investigating their own missing child, their own jurisdiction. Nobody connected them. And the third site, Carl asked. Hartley hesitated. There is no third site in the logs, but there's a gap. Payments Patterson received that don't correspond to any documented acquisitions. Either he was better at covering his tracks for some operations or he didn't finish. Or there are children you don't know about. Maggie completed the thought. The weight of that settled over the table like smoke. FBI wants to handle this officially. Warrants raid teams protocols. But that takes time. Minimum 48 hours to organize, coordinate across jurisdictions, get tactical teams in position. Hartley looked at them directly. If Patterson has a partner checking on these sites, if anyone's monitoring his communications, those children could be moved or killed before law enforcement arrives. The unspoken ask hung in the air. Hank voiced it. You want us to do a reconnaissance, get eyes on those sites, confirm if anyone's there, report back. I want you to do what you did yesterday, be in the right place, pay attention, act if necessary. Carl's expression was grim. This is illegal. Whatever we find won't be admissible in court. We could face charges, trespassing, obstruction, evidence tampering. All true, but you're asking anyway. I'm asking because if there's a child dying in a basement while we wait for paperwork, legal procedure doesn't matter. Moral imperative does. Maggie felt her heart do that irregular flutter, the warning signs she'd learned to dread. She pressed her hand to her chest, willing it to stabilize. Not yet. She didn't have time to fall apart yet. The ranch is closest, 40 miles southwest. We could be there in 90 minutes. Hank was already calculating. Approach on foot, the last mile observed from distance, report findings. In and out, no engagement unless someone's in immediate danger. Agreed, Carl said, though his tone suggested he thought this was a terrible idea he was going along with anyway. Hartley provided equipment, satellite phones with encryption, topographic maps with the ranch location marked, handheld GPS unit, first aid kit, the heavy-duty kind that spoke to what he thought they might find. He pulled Maggie aside as they were preparing to leave. I need to tell you something. Off the record. She waited. My son, Matthew. He disappeared 15 years ago. Rest stop outside Las Cruces, just vanished. We searched for months, no trace, no leads, nothing. His voice was raw with old pain. I've been working missing children cases ever since, chasing ghosts, trying to give other families the answers Orty never got. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, just, if you find someone alive out there, you get them out. Rules be damned, because I'd give anything for someone to have done that for Matthew. They rode out at noon, the sun brutal overhead, the temperature climbing toward triple digits. The highway stretched before them, heat shimmer, turning the distant mountains into liquid mirages. Maggie's chest hurt with every breath, but she didn't slow down. This might be the last thing she did that mattered. She was going to see it through. Carl's voice crackled over the comms. Taking the exit in 2 miles. From there, it's 20 miles on state route, then 12 on dirt road. The pavement gave way to gravel, then to packed dirt that kicked up dust clouds behind them. Scrub brush and creosote stretched to the horizon. No trees, no shade. Nothing but empty land that looked like it had never supported life and never would. They stashed the bikes half a mile out behind an outcropping of rock that provided minimal cover. The walk-in was silent, single-file, Carl leading, because he knew how to read terrain, how to spot the paths of least resistance. The sun hammered down, sweat soaked through their shirts within minutes. Maggie's heart was racing irregular, sending jolts of pain through her chest. She fumbled for a nitro pill. Her fourth today, double what the cardiologist had said was safe. The burn under her tongue did nothing to ease the crushing sensation in her sternum. Carl raised his fist. Stop signal. They froze. Ahead, maybe 400 yards, a structure materialized through the heat. Prefab metal building, 30 by 40 feet, corrugated steel, rusted to the color of dried blood. No windows, one door visible. Solar panels on the roof, satellite dish pointed skyward. A white panel van parked alongside, decade-old, nondescript. They observed for 20 minutes, Carl with binoculars scanning every detail, Maggie and Hank watching approaches and sightlines. No movement, no sound except wind whistling through gaps in the metal. Doors reinforced, Carl noted. That's not standard for a storage building. And the padlock, that's heavy duty, military grade. Someone built this to keep people out, Hank said. Or in. Maggie's vision was starting to gray at the edge's tunnel vision, creeping in. She blinked hard, tried to regulate her breathing. Not now. Hold together just a little longer. I need to get closer, Hank said. Confirm if anyone's inside. I'll go with you, Maggie managed, though her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Carl stayed at the observation point 200 yards back with binoculars and the satellite phone. Hank and Maggie circled wide using terrain for cover, moving in careful increments. 20 minutes to cover 400 yards. Every step deliberate, every sound magnified. At the building, Hank checked the van. Locked, empty. Registration sticker expired 2 years ago. Maggie approached the door, pressed her ear against the metal. The world tilted sideways. She caught herself against the wall, felt the metal burning hot under her palm. Then she heard it, faint but unmistakable. Whimpering or crying, or the sound of someone who'd forgotten how to make noise louder than a whisper. She pressed her palm flat against the door, felt vibration, rhythm, breathing. Carl. Her voice over the radio was barely functional. Someone's inside. Hank checked the padlock. It was hanging open, just looped through the hasp. Not locked. Either someone left in a hurry or it was a trap. Could be a trap, Hank echoed her thought. Only one way to know. They opened the door slowly. Hinges screamed, sunlight cut into darkness. The smell that rolled out was overwhelming human waste, fear, decay, desperation. Inside, chain link fencing divided the space into cages. 3 separate enclosures, each 8 by 8 feet. 2 were empty stained mattresses and empty water bottles, the only evidence of occupation. The third cage held a child. Girl maybe 10 years old, huddled in the corner. Filthy, emaciated, one ankle chained to the fence. When the light hit her, she didn't scream. She just stared with eyes that had seen too much and broken from it. Maggie's heart gave out. The pain was sudden and complete, like someone had reached into her chest and squeezed. Her vision went white, then black. Her knees buckled. She was falling the ground, rushing up to meet her, and somewhere distant, she heard Hank calling her name. Then nothing. Carl was running before his conscious mind registered what was happening, covering 200 yards in under a minute, satellite phone already dialing emergency services. He crashed through the door to find Hank performing chest compressions on Maggie's still form, counting under his breath, 30 compressions, then 2 rescue breaths. The rhythm of CPR burned into muscle memory from Marine Corps training. The girl in the cage watched with dead eyes. Carl dropped beside them, checked Maggie's pulse. Nothing. He took over compressions while Hank handled breathing. Come on, Maggie. Don't you fucking quit. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes without a pulse. Brain damage started at 4 minutes. Death shortly after. Carl felt a rib crack under his hands and kept going. Another. Ribs could heal. Dead was permanent. 4 minutes. Her lips were blue. Her skin was gray. At 4 minutes 30 seconds, she gasped. Her back arched. Her eyes flew open, unfocused and wild. Stay down, Hank commanded. Don't move. Helicopter's on the way. But Maggie was already trying to sit up, her voice a rasp. The girl. Get the girl. We've got her, Carl said, though they didn't, not yet, the child still chained in the cage watching them, like they might be another nightmare in a long series of nightmares. The sound of rotor blades grew audible, distant, but approaching fast. Life flight helicopter medevac, the kind that came when minutes mattered. Hartley had authorized it before they had even confirmed what they'd found. Hank worked on the chain while Carl stayed with Maggie. The padlock on the shackle was different from the door, locked tight, no key. Hank searched the building, found a toolbox, found bolt cutters. It took 8 minutes of sawing through hardened steel, 8 minutes of the girl watching him with eyes that expected pain, expected betrayal, expected nothing good. When the chain broke, she didn't move. Didn't understand she was free, or didn't believe it, or couldn't process the concept anymore. Hank wrapped her in his jacket, lifted her like she weighed nothing. She probably weighed 60 pounds. Should have weighed 80. She was dying slowly from neglect and would have died completely in another few days. The helicopter landed in a clearing 200 yards away, dust storm from the rotors turning the world into brown chaos. 2 paramedics rushed out with a stretcher for Maggie, but she refused. Her first, pointing at the girl in Hank's arms. She's been here longer. The female paramedic, Rosa, 40-something, veteran eyes, took the girl, gently started assessing vitals. severe dehydration, malnutrition, exposure, possible sepsis from infected wounds. She looked at Hank. You got here just in time. Maybe. They loaded both of them into the helicopter, Maggie on one stretcher, the girl on another. Rosa worked on the girl while her partner handled Maggie's IV line and cardiac monitoring. You were clinically dead for 3 minutes, the paramedic told Maggie. You need surgery. You need ICU. You need to stop whatever the hell you're doing that puts you in cardiac arrest. I need to know she lives, Maggie replied, looking at the girl who was staring at nothing broken in ways that might never heal. The helicopter lifted off, banking east toward El Paso. Hank and Carl stood in the rotor wash, watching it disappear into the bright sky. She's going to die doing this, Carl said. Yeah, probably. And we're going to let her. It's what she wants, what she needs. You going to tell a dying woman she can't spend her last days the way she chooses? Carl had no answer for that. They returned to the building because evidence needed to be documented before FBI arrived. Carl photographed everything with his phone, the cages, the chains, the conditions. Hank searched more thoroughly, found what they'd missed in the chaos. A laptop locked, children's clothing in multiple sizes, food supplies and water bottles enough to keep someone alive for weeks, and photographs tacked to a wall like trophies. 14 different children in various stages of captivity, different faces, different times, all with the same dead eyes. Hank counted them twice, hoping he'd miscounted. 14. The girl they'd just pulled out made 15. One photo stood out, a boy, 9 or 10, dark hair, gap-toothed smile. Someone had made him smile for the camera, and the cruelty of that was worse than the captivity. Hank stared at that face, trying to place why it looked familiar. His phone had signal here barely, a text from Travis with a photo attachment. This is Sophie. Thought you should have a picture of your granddaughter. The photo loaded slowly. A little girl in a school photo, same age as the one they'd just rescued, smiling with missing front teeth, wearing a dress that was probably her favorite. Sophie Holloway. Hank looked between his phone and the photographs on the wall. Different girls, but the same age, the same vulnerability. His granddaughter had been hours away from becoming one of those photos. Hours away from this cage and that dead-eyed stare. He felt something break inside him that had been holding together through will alone. Carl found him sitting outside the building, head in his hands shaking. Not crying, Marines didn't cry, but something close to it. FBI's 30 minutes out. We should secure the perimeter. Hank didn't move. This is Fallujah again, he said finally. Different country, different circumstances, same result. I made a decision, someone dies. I decided to come here first instead of Van Horn. What if there's a child in Van Horn right now dying because we chose wrong? Carl sat beside him in the dust. Fallujah wasn't your fault. The hell it wasn't. I called in those coordinates. 11 men died. Marcus died. Carl's voice was quiet. My brother, he was one of those 11 men. Hank turned to look at him, really look at him for the first time since they'd met. I know. That's why you hate me. I did hate you. For 15 years, I blamed you for taking my brother, for making the wrong call, for surviving when he didn't. Carl picked up a handful of dirt, let it sift through his fingers. But Diane's death taught me something. Sometimes there is no right call. Sometimes you choose and people die, and it's not because you're bad at your bar or careless or evil. It's just chaos, circumstance. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong coordinates fed through a system that was already broken. That's supposed to make me feel better. No, it's supposed to make you understand that carrying guilt doesn't honor the dead. Acting does. We found a child today. Saved her life. That matters. And if there's another child in Van Horn dying right now, then we go to Van Horn next and we save them too. Or we try. That's all we can do, keep trying. FBI arrived with Hartley in the lead vehicle. Crime scene investigators fanned out, documenting everything with the thoroughness of people who knew this evidence had to be bulletproof. Hartley examined the photographs on the wall, his face going gray. We'll run these through missing persons databases, see how many we can identify. He pulled down one photo carefully, hands gloved. This boy, I know this face. Carl moved closer. You've seen him before. Brandon Orozco, disappeared 14 months ago from a park in Alamogordo. Family's been searching ever since. If this photo is recent, He didn't finish. It means he might still be alive, Hank said. It means Patterson's operation is bigger than we thought. 14 photographs. We've only identified 3 missing children so far. Where are the other 11? The laptop was sent to FBI cyber forensics. The photographs were cataloged and cross-referenced. The building was processed inch by inch, and slowly a picture emerged that was worse than anyone had imagined. Hartley's phone rang 90 minutes into the processing. He listened, his expression transforming from grim to something like desperate hope. They cracked the laptop. Patterson kept meticulous records, dates, locations, methods, and current operational sites. He looked at Hank and Carl. There are 2 more locations, both referenced in the past month, both marked as occupied. Occupied as in there are children there right now, or were as of Patterson's last entry 3 days ago. Carl was already pulling up maps on his phone, where one near Nogales, Arizona, one outside Van Horn, Texas. Hartley showed them the coordinates. FBI is mobilizing teams for both locations, but they're remote. It'll take hours to get tactical units in position. Maybe longer. How much longer? 6 hours minimum for Nogales, 8 for Van Horn. Hank looked at Carl. Carl looked at the sky where the helicopter had disappeared carrying Maggie and the girl they'd found. Van Horn is 3 hours from here if we ride hard, Hank said. FBI won't authorize you. We're not asking for authorization. We're asking for coordinates. You can approve or deny, but we're going either way. Hartley made a decision that would probably end his career or define it no middle ground. He sent them the coordinates, detailed satellite imagery, approach routes. If you go, you don't engage. You observe and report. Let FBI handle extraction. And if someone's dying while we observe, then you do what you did today, what you have to do. They rode east as the sun started its descent, the temperature dropping from unbearable to merely oppressive. The miles unwound at 80, then 90, then faster than was safe on roads this empty. They rotated lead position, Hank navigating while Carl monitored FBI tactical net over the encrypted radio Hartley had provided. The chatter was constant. Teams mobilizing jurisdictions, coordinating negotiators being briefed, the machinery of law enforcement grinding forward with bureaucratic inevitability. But slow, too slow. Carl's radio crackled with Hartley's voice. Nogales site is empty. Structures there, but no current occupants. Van Horn is now primary target. Hank keyed his mic. We're 90 minutes from Van Horn. What's your ETA? FBI tactical is 6 hours out. Local sheriff's department is responding, but they're not equipped for potential hostage situation. So we get there first. Looks that way. Intel from Patterson's logs says he was holding 2 subjects at Van Horn location. Brothers ages 9 and 11, taken 6 days ago from a rest stop near Fort Stockton. 6 days. They'd been captive for 6 days while Patterson operated, and FBI gathered evidence, and the system moved at the speed of process. 6 days was a lifetime for a child in a cage. Maggie's voice came weakly over Hank's phone, a call patched through from the hospital. Don't stop. Find them. You're supposed to be in surgery. Postponed it. Told them I had to make a call first. Her breathing was labored, each word an effort. Promise me you'll finish this. Don't let me dying slow you down. You're not dying. I am. We both know it. But those boys in Van Horn, they're alive right now. Right this second. Keep them that way. The line went dead. They rode through dusk headlights, cutting through the gathering dark. Van Horn appeared as scattered lights in the distance, a town that existed because the interstate ran through it, and not for any other reason. Population 3,000, 1 stoplight. The kind of place people pass through without stopping. The abandoned gas station was 12 miles outside town down a state road that saw maybe 3 cars a day. Texaco Station from the 60s closed when the interstate bypassed it, left to rot in the desert sun. Main building boarded up, pumps long since removed. But the garage door was chained shut with a new padlock. They observed from half a mile out as full darkness fell. No vehicles, no lights, no movement. Just the building squatting in the dark like something that had died and been forgotten. Carl used night vision binoculars, scanning for heat signatures, security systems, any sign of life. Nothing. Could be empty. Or soundproofed, Hank replied. Only one way to know. They approached on foot, moving through the dark with the careful silence of people who'd done this before in places where mistakes were fatal. The chain on the garage door was new, the padlock heavy-duty. No key, no way through except force. Hank pulled his sidearm, aimed at the lock, looked at Carl. "Once I shoot, all hell breaks loose. You ready?" Carl nodded. The shot cracked across the empty desert. The lock shattered. The chain fell. They yanked the door open fast, weapons raised, ready for anything. Inside were cages, two of them, both occupied. Two boys, one maybe 11, one maybe 9. Brothers, you could see it in their faces in the way the older one was positioned in front of the younger, despite both being chained. When the door opened and light spilled in, the older boy screamed, "Don't hurt him! Take me, but don't hurt him!" Hank holstered his weapon, raised his hands. "We're not here to hurt you. We're here to get you out. What's your name?" The boy didn't answer, didn't believe, just kept himself between his brother and these new strangers who might be worse than the old ones. Carl keyed his radio. "Hartley, we have them. 2 boys alive, responsive. Get medical here now." While they waited for the locks to be bypassed, electronic this time, more sophisticated than the ranch, Hank knelt outside the older boy's cage, keeping distance, keeping his voice calm. "My name's Hank. This is Carl. We're going to get you out of here and back to your family. I promise." The younger boy started crying. "I want my mama." "Then let's get you to her." It took Carl 15 minutes to hotwire the electronic locks, 15 minutes of the boys watching with hollow eyes like they'd learned hope was just another kind of pain. When the locks finally clicked open, they didn't move. Traumatized into paralysis, believing it was a trick, another test, another cruelty. Hank entered the cage, slowly crouched down. "It's okay. You're safe now." The older boy, Miguel, they'd learn later, finally spoke. "There was another kid here. Yesterday, a man came and took her." Everything stopped. "What man?" Carl's voice was sharp. "Not the one who took us. Someone else." They talked about the buyer and delivery. "The man gave money. Lots of it." Hank and Carl exchanged looks. Patterson wasn't just a predator. He was a supplier. And there was a network. "Did you see where they went?" Miguel shook his head. "But I heard them say El Paso. Something about a delivery tonight." Tonight, now, a child being sold right now while they stood in this garage trying to process the information. Hartley arrived 40 minutes later, FBI vehicles right behind him. The boys were wrapped in blankets, drinking water, slowly eating granola bars in careful bites, like they couldn't quite trust the food was real. Medical was on the way. Their mother had been contacted and was driving through the night to get to them. Miguel was alert enough to give a statement. Description of the second man. 50s gray hair, expensive watch. Vehicle was a black SUV Cadillac or similar. The conversation he'd overheard about El Paso, about the buyer, about delivery schedules. Hartley's face was stone as he relayed this to FBI command. "We have confirmation of an active network. Patterson was acquisition. Someone else's sales. We need to find out who before they go to ground." The FBI agent in charge, Sandra Mitchell, 20 years in the Bureau. Hard eyes and harder voice pulled Hartley aside. The bikers could hear parts of the conversation, words like unprecedented and civilian interference and legal liability. Hartley's response was quiet but carried. "They've saved 3 lives in 18 hours. I don't care about procedure. Neither do I off the record, but on the record, they need to stand down. Now, this is an active federal investigation." Hartley returned to where Hank and Carl stood by their bikes. "You need to go. FBI's taking over. You've done more than anyone could ask. But if you stay, there will be complications." "The girl Miguel mentioned," Hank said. "The one taken yesterday. What happens to her?" "We'll find her." "When are you?" "I don't know." Carl studied the FBI vehicles, the agents coordinating the machinery of justice finally engaged. "They'll do it right, by the book, following procedures that take time. Time that girl might not have." "What are you suggesting?" Hartley kept his voice low. "I'm suggesting procedure has its place, but sometimes you need people willing to operate outside it." Mitchell was approaching, clearly intending to formalize their dismissal. Hartley made a decision. "Patterson gave us one name under interrogation, William Strand, lives in El Paso, accountant, clean record. According to Patterson, he's the broker, the middleman between acquisition and buyers." "You're telling us this why?" Hank asked. Because FBI won't move on Strand without probable cause beyond Patterson's testimony. A convicted predator's word isn't enough for a warrant. We need confirmation he's involved. Hartley's eyes were steady. We need someone to get eyes on Strand's property, confirm suspicious activity, then we can move legally. Carl understood what wasn't being said. You want us to do illegal surveillance so you can establish legal probable cause. I want you to finish what you started. One more time. Mitchell had reached them. Gentlemen, we appreciate your assistance, but this is now an FBI matter. We'll need formal statements from you, but after that, you are free to go. They gave their statements, described finding the boys Miguel's information about the second man, everything they'd seen and heard. By the time they finished, it was near midnight. Miguel and Carlos, the younger brother, were in an ambulance heading to El Paso General. Their mother would meet them there. Hank and Carl rode away as FBI flooded the scene with lights and activity. But they didn't ride home. They rode to El Paso 90 miles south toward an address Hartley had slipped into Hank's pocket on a piece of paper that officially didn't exist. William Strand lived in a residential neighborhood, middle-class comfort houses with lawns and basketball hoops. The kind of place where everyone knew their neighbors and nothing bad ever happened. They parked 3 blocks away, borrowed a van from someone Carl knew, set up surveillance from a position with clear sight lines. Carl had the telephoto camera. Hank monitored radio traffic. Both of them were exhausted, running on fumes and purpose. Hour 1, lights on in Strand's house. Movement visible through windows. Someone walking, watching TV. Normal suburban evening. Hour 2, a vehicle pulled into Strand's driveway. Toyota Camry, nondescript. Strand emerged, got in the vehicle, drove away. He's mobile, Carl noted. They should have followed, should have maintained surveillance. But Hank was thinking about Miguel's timeline. The girl taken yesterday, delivery scheduled for tonight. If she was in that house right now, she was running out of time. I'm going in, Hank said. That's breaking and entering. I'm aware. Carl looked at him for a long moment. Thought about his brother Marcus, about Diane, about all the times following rules had led to people dying while bureaucracy moved at its own pace. Then I'm going with you. They approached through backyards, staying low, avoiding motion lights. Strand's fence was 6 feet wood, easy to scale. The backyard was neat patio furniture, a grill, nothing unusual. The sliding glass door had a gap in the curtains. Hank looked through. Living room. TV on, playing cartoons. On the couch, a small figure. A girl, maybe 8 years old. Dark hair, pink nightgown that looked new, store-bought. She was eating cereal, watching TV. Physically, she looked okay. Not restrained, not injured. But her eyes were empty. Trauma flat. The affect of someone who'd stopped fighting because fighting only made things worse. Hank keyed his radio. Got visual. Female child, approximate age 8, appears unharmed. What's the play? Before Hartley could respond, Carl touched Hank's arm. Pointed. In the kitchen, visible through another window, a cell phone on the counter screen illuminated with a new text message. They moved to see it better. The text was visible. Package secured. Delivery tomorrow night. Usual place. Below it, another message. Confirmed. Payment on delivery. $50K. Strand wasn't keeping the girl. He was selling her. Tomorrow night. 24 hours from now. Hank's hand moved toward the door handle. Carl stopped him. Think. If we go in now, we save her. But the buyer gets away. The network continues. Someone else gets taken next month. And if we wait 24 hours, she spends another night thinking no one's coming. Another day believing this is her life now. I know, but we're not looking at good options. We're looking at less bad options. Hank called Hartley, explained what they'd seen, the text message, the timeline. Hartley's response was pained. FBI can raid the house now, save the girl, arrest Strand, but the buyer disappears and we're back to square one, or we wait, set up for tomorrow night, catch them both, end this. You're asking us to leave a child in captivity for another day. I'm asking you to make an impossible choice, same kind you made today at the ranch. Hank thought about Sophie, about how close she'd come to being in a cage, about Miguel protecting his brother, about all the children in Patterson's photographs who might still be alive somewhere waiting for someone to find them. If anything happens to her in the next 24 hours, it's on me. It's on all of us, Hartley said quietly. They maintained surveillance through the night and into the next day, rotating shifts, 2 watching while 1 rested in the van. Strand left for work in the morning, returned for lunch, went back out. The girl was visible through windows at intervals, watching TV, eating meals, existing in a nightmare that looked like normalcy. She never tried to escape, never screamed. The conditioning was complete. Maggie called once from the hospital. She'd refused surgery again, checked herself out against medical advice. Where are you, Tree? El Paso, watching a house where a girl's being held. How long? Until tonight, FBI's setting up to catch the buyer when he comes for her. And if something goes wrong, then we improvise. Her breathing was labored over the phone. I'm coming down. You're in no condition. I'm dying anyway. Let me die doing something useful. She arrived 6 hours later, driving herself, looking like death warmed over. Her skin was gray, her lips had a blue tinge, but her eyes were clear and determined. You should be in a hospital, Carl said. I was in a hospital. I left. Now brief me. They brought her up to speed. The girl inside. Strand's routine. The buyer scheduled to arrive at 8:30 p.m. FBI teams in position around the neighborhood, ready to move when the transaction happened. The sun set. Darkness fell. Strand returned home at 6 p.m. and didn't leave again. At 8:15, a black SUV Cadillac Escalade tinted windows pulled up to Strand's house. A man got out. 60s expensive suit, silver hair. He looked like a businessman, or a grandfather, or a lawyer. He looked like someone you'd trust with your kids. He knocked on Strand's door. Strand let him in. Buyers on site, Hank radioed to Hartley. FBI is moving in. ETA 10 minutes. Do not engage. Through the window, they watched the transaction. Strand and the buyer talking, money changing hands, a briefcase presumably full of cash. The buyer examining the girl like she was merchandise, checking her teeth, her hair, her hands assessing quality and value. Maggie's hands were white-knuckled on the van's door handle. I'm going in. FBI's 10 minutes out. He's loading her into his vehicle. If he drives away, we lose them. The buyer was indeed leading the girl toward the door, toward the SUV parked in the driveway. He had her hand. She was following docilely, broken into compliance. Hank made the call. We're engaging. Negative, stand down. Maggie killed the radio and was out of the van before either man could stop her. Hank and Carl followed, crossing the street in full view of anyone watching, direct and purposeful. Strand saw them first. Who the hell? Hank drew his weapon. Step away from the vehicle. The buyer froze, the girl's hand still in his. What is this, Strand? Who are these people? We're the people who stop men like you, Maggie said, her voice steady despite the crushing pain in her chest. The girl recognized Maggie from yesterday, from the window where she'd watched them watching. Something flickered in her dead eyes. Not hope, just recognition. Strand bolted back into the house, slammed the door. The buyer reached inside his jacket. Hank fired once, hitting the man's hand. The pistol the buyer had been reaching for clattered to the pavement. The buyer fell screaming. Maggie ran to the girl. Honey, we're getting you out. But the girl didn't move, didn't understand freedom, or couldn't process it, or had forgotten what it meant. Isabel. Maggie used the name Hartley had given them, the missing child from 11 days ago. Your mom is waiting. She's been looking for you every single day. Let's go home. The girl Isabel blinked, looked at Maggie, whispered in a voice rusty from disuse, my mom, your mom. Mustache chagrins filled the night. FBI vehicles, local police, the full weight of law enforcement descending. Agents swarmed, securing Strand inside the house, treating the buyer's gunshot wound before arresting him, separating everyone for statements. A woman arrived in a patrol car escort, fell out before it fully stopped running. Isabel's mother, Lucia Reyes, dropped to the ground, sobbing, pulling her daughter into an embrace that was desperate and relieved and broken. Isabel clung to her mother, crying, saying "Mama," over and over, like it was the only word she remembered. Maggie watched from 20 feet away, thinking about Elena, about the reunion they never got. Her chest was crushing, the pain spreading down her arm. She recognized the symptoms. Another cardiac event bigger than the last. She sat down hard on the curb. Carl was beside her instantly. Maggie, I'm fine, Sue. You're not fine. You're having a heart attack. Then I'm having it here. I'm not leaving until I know she's safe. Paramedics tried to treat her. She refused. FBI tried to separate her for questioning. She told them to wait. She watched Isabel and Lucia, Watched a mother and daughter reunited. Watched something good happen in a world full of terrible things. Only when Isabel was loaded into an ambulance, Lucia beside her, both of them, safe and together, did Maggie finally let the paramedics approach. Now, she said. Now you can take me. They transported her to the same hospital where the girl from the ranch was recovering. Emma Price, they'd learned her name was. Taken 8 months ago from a park in Tucson. 8 months in that cage before they found her. Maggie lasted 2 more days. The surgery was successful, but the damage was too extensive. Her heart had been dying for months, maybe years. The final events were just the conclusion of a story already written. Hank and Carl were there when she woke up in ICU tubes and monitors and machines, keeping her alive when her body wanted to quit. Did she make it? Maggie's voice was barely a whisper. Isabel. She's alive. Home with her mother. Both boys from Van Horn are with their family. Emma from the ranch is stable. You saved them all. We saved them. Team effort. She smiled weakly. How many? 4 children recovered. Patterson's network dismantled. Strand and the buyer in custody. Hartley says they're tracking down others in the organization. Could be a dozen more arrests. And the children from the photographs. Hank's expression went dark. Still searching. Some might still be alive. Some. He didn't finish. Maggie nodded, understanding. You couldn't save them all. You saved the ones you could and carried the weight of the ones you couldn't. No regrets, she said. None. Well, one, I wish I'd had more time, but I used what I had. That's all anyone can do. She died that night in her sleep peacefully for once, her heart finally giving out completely. She was 58 years old. She'd spent her last days saving children. It was enough. The funeral was full military honors, flag-draped coffin, 21-gun salute, Marines in dress blues. Elena's photo on the memorial table next to her mother's, the two of them together finally. Travis Cooper attended with Sophie. The little girl placed a drawing on the coffin, 3 motorcycles and 3 people, the same drawing from the gas station, but with 4 children added now, the ones they'd saved. Travis approached Hank afterward. I'm sorry I kept Sophie from you. I'm sorry I gave you reasons to. Can we try to know each other again for Sophie's sake, if nothing else? Hank looked at his son, at his granddaughter, at the family he had lost through his own failings, and might have a chance to reclaim. Yeah, we can try. Carl stood alone by Maggie's grave after everyone else had left. Hank found him there an hour later. She died for this, Carl said. She died doing what mattered to her. There's a difference. Is there? Asked the 4 kids who went home. They stood in silence, 2 men who'd started as enemies and ended as something like brothers bound by shared purpose and shared loss. What now? Carl asked. Hartley wants to keep working with them. Says there are 13 children from Patterson's photographs still unaccounted for. Wants us to help find them. We're not cops. No, but we're people who show up. And sometimes that's enough. They walked back to their bikes, Maggie's shovel head parked between them, the one she'd rebuilt with Elena. No one had the heart to move it yet. One more ride, Hank said, for her. They mounted their bikes, Maggie's between them, riderless but not empty. They rode through the city as the sun set, 3 motorcycles where there should have been 4, carrying the memory of someone who'd spent her last days making them count. The road stretched ahead, endless and full of purpose. There were children still missing, families still searching, work that needed people willing to do it. Maggie had shown them how. Now they had to carry it forward. 3 weeks passed like water through cupped hands, time marked by funerals and investigations, and nights spent staring at walls. The Iron Phoenix clubhouse felt emptier without Maggie's bike parked in its usual spot, without her sitting at the bar reading case files Hartley forwarded, without her voice cutting through bullshit with surgical precision. Hank sat in that same spot, now laptop open, scrolling through news articles that all told variations of the same story. Interstate trafficking ring exposed. 14 children recovered, 11 alive. 3 bodies found in shallow graves near the ranch. Robert Patterson awaiting trial on 47 felony counts. William Strand facing similar charges. The buyer, Gordon Miles, retired dentist, grandfather of 4, looking at 25 years minimum. 4 more arrests in the past week, Patterson's network collapsing under FBI pressure. But 13 children from those photographs remained unaccounted for, their faces haunting Hartley's missing persons database. their families still waiting for answers that might never come. One face in particular kept drawing Hank's attention. The boy with the gap-toothed smile, the one someone had made perform happiness for the camera. Brandon Orozco missing 14 months. The file said he'd been 9 when he disappeared. He'd be 10 now if he was still alive. Carl entered coffee in both hands, set one in front of Hank without a word. They'd developed rhythms in the past 3 weeks, patterns of coexistence built on shared trauma and shared purpose. Not friendship exactly, something harder to define but no less real. Hartley called, wants to meet. About what? Didn't say, just said it's urgent and we need to come alone. They rode to Silver City in silence, the same diner where this had all started, the same back booth where Hartley looked like he'd aged a decade in 3 weeks. New lines around his eyes, gray in his hair that hadn't been there before. The weight of 13 missing children pressing down like a physical thing. Coffee, the waitress appeared with a pot. Just water, Hartley said. His hands were shaking. I haven't slept in 4 days. Hank and Carl waited. Whatever this was, it was bad. You didn't drive 200 miles to deliver good news. Hartley opened his laptop, pulled up files that made his jaw tighten. Patterson decided to cooperate. Facing life anyway, figured he'd try to reduce his sentence by giving up everyone in the network. He turned the screen. He gave us names, locations, 20 years of operational history. The spreadsheet was extensive. Dates, acquisitions, transfers, sales. Children reduced to inventory numbers and transaction records. The clinical efficiency of it was somehow worse than the violence. We've made 4 arrests based on his information. Another 6 pending warrants. The network is bigger than we thought. Multi-state, maybe international connections. Hartley's voice was hollow. But there's something else. Something Patterson held back until yesterday. He pulled up a different file. A name at the top, Colonel Daniel Voss, USMC Retief. Hank felt the ground shift. Voss, you know him. He was my commanding officer, Iraq 2003 to 2004. The words caught in Hank's throat. He was there during Fallujah. Carl was already connecting pieces, his analyst mind working the problem. How is Voss connected to Patterson? According to Patterson, Voss is the top of the pyramid, the money man. The one who organized the network, recruited the hunters and brokers, established the buyer connections. Hartley showed them financial records, shell companies' offshore accounts. He's been running this operation for 20 years. Patterson was just one asset among many. Hank's world was tilting sideways. That's not possible. Voss was a decorated officer, 30 years in the Corps, Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor. He did. Hartley's voice was flat. And there's more. Patterson says Voss used his military position to cover his operations, would transfer personnel who got too close to discovering things, reassign investigators, manipulate evidence. He paused, including Fallujah. The air went out of the room. What about Fallujah? Patterson was Navy Psych Eval at Camp Pendleton in 2003. He diagnosed you with PTSD, recommended discharge. Voss overturned it, kept you in command despite the red flags. Hartley pulled up another document, classified files he shouldn't have had access to. But here's what Patterson didn't know. The coordinates you called in that day, they weren't wrong when you transmitted them. Hank's vision tunneled. What are you saying? I'm saying someone altered them between your transmission and the air support receiving them. Someone with access to command communications. Someone who needed a distraction while moving high-value trafficking operations out of Iraq. Carl's voice was ice. You're saying Voss sabotaged the airstrike, deliberately killed those Marines to cover his crimes. I'm saying the evidence suggests that, but evidence isn't proof, and Voss is too well connected to touch without ironclad proof. Hank stood abruptly, the booth too small, the air too thin. My men, 11 Marines, they died because Voss needed a distraction. Marcus died because of Voss, Carl said quietly. His brother, the weight they'd been carrying for 15 years, suddenly redistributed. FBI can't move on him without more evidence. Hartley continued. His lawyers are already circling. He's claiming Patterson is lying to reduce his sentence, that he's being targeted because of his military record. He closed the laptop. But if we could prove the connection between Voss and the trafficking network, prove he was using military resources for criminal enterprise prove he deliberately sabotaged Fallujah. You want us to get that proof? Hank said. I want you to help me get justice. For Marcus, for the 11 Marines, for the children, for all of it. Carl was studying the files, his mind already working. Where is Voss now? Santa Fe. Has a ranch outside the city. Respectable. Pillar of the community. The kind of man who gets honored at Veterans Day ceremonies. And what exactly are we supposed to do? We're not investigators. We're not equipped for. You're people who've gone places law enforcement can't go, done things we can't officially sanction, found children when the system failed. Hartley's eyes were burning. My son Matthew. Patterson's records show he was one of the first acquisitions 15 years ago, sold into the network. Voss's files might tell us where he went after that. If he's, his voice broke. If he's alive somewhere, I need to know. Even if the answer destroys me, I need to know. The weight of that settled over them like ash. What do you need from us? Hank asked. Get inside Voss's property, find documentation, communications, anything that ties him to the network. We need physical evidence, not just Patterson's testimony. That's breaking and entering. Evidence obtained illegally won't be admissible. It'll give us direction. Show us where to look officially. Sometimes you need to know where the bodies are buried before you can get a warrant to dig them up. They rode back to Flagstaff in silence, each man processing what they'd learned. Hank was thinking about Fallujah, about the coordinates he'd triple-checked before calling them in, about 11 men who'd trusted him and died because someone in the chain had rewritten their fate. Carl was thinking about Marcus, about 15 years of misplaced blame, about how the man he'd hated might have been just as much a victim as the brother he'd lost. Travis was waiting at the clubhouse when they returned, Sophie beside him. The girl looked healthier than she had 3 weeks ago, the terror fading from her eyes, though the memory would never fully leave. She ran to Hank when she saw him, threw her arms around his waist. Grandpa Hank! The name hit him like a physical blow. He'd never been called that before. Didn't know if he deserved it. But Sophie didn't care about deserving. She just held on like he was solid ground in an uncertain world. Travis approached more slowly, the bridge between them still being built one careful board at a time. Sorry to show up unannounced. Sophie wanted to see you. She's been having nightmares about the gas station. Doctor says seeing you might help, seeing that you're okay and she's okay. I'm glad you came. Sophie pulled back, looked up at him with serious eyes. The man at the gas station, the one who tried to take me, is he in jail? Yeah, sweetheart, he's in jail. He can't hurt you anymore. What about the other kids, the ones he took before me? The question was too aware, too informed for a 7-year-old. But trauma-aged children in ways that couldn't be measured in years. We're still looking for some of them, but we found 4, got them home safe. Because of you and your friends. Because your mom called the police. Because you were brave and ran when you knew something was wrong. Because a lot of people did the right thing. Sophie considered this, then pulled something from her backpack. Another drawing, this one more elaborate. The gas station. 3 motorcycles. 3 people. But also 4 other children, each labeled with the name Emma, Miguel, Carlos, Isabel. And in the corner, drawn carefully, a woman with red hair and angel wings. That's Ms. Maggie. Travis said she died, but she's watching over the kids now. Hank's throat closed. He took the drawing with hands that weren't quite steady. She'd like that, knowing you drew her with wings. After Travis and Sophie left, promising to visit again soon, Hank sat alone with the drawing spread on the bar. Carl found him there an hour later. We're really doing this, going after Voss. You want to walk away? I want to know what I'm walking into. Voss isn't some predator operating alone. He's got resources, connections, probably security. If we go after him and fail, best case, we end up in prison. Worst case, we end up dead. Then we don't fail. Maggie died doing this work. You ready to die too? Hank looked at Sophie's drawing, at the angel with red hair watching over children. Maggie died making her last days count. If I die getting justice for Marcus and those 11 Marines and all those missing kids, that's better than dying in my sleep 30 years from now, having never done anything that mattered. Carl sat beside him, silent for a long moment. Marcus would have liked you saying that. He believed in the mission, believed what we were doing mattered. He paused. I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago. What? The day Marcus died, he sent me an email. I didn't get it until 3 days later because I was in the field. He wrote it the morning of the operation before you called in the airstrike. Carl pulled out his phone, opened an old email, read, Carl, if something happens to me today, I want you to know Sergeant Cooper is the best officer I've ever served under. He cares about his men. He checks and double checks everything. If I die under his command, it's because God wanted me home, not because he failed me. Don't blame him. Honor. Don't blame him. Honor the mission. Marcus. The words hit harder than any physical blow. You've had that email for 15 years and never told me. I was angry. Grief makes you stupid. I wanted someone to blame, and you were there and Marcus wasn't. Carl's voice was rough. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. They sat with that for a while, the weight of 15 years of misplaced anger finally lifting. We find Voss, Hank said. We get proof. We end this. For Marcus, for Matthew Hartley, for all of them. And then what? Then maybe we can both sleep at night. They spent 2 days planning, researching Voss's property through satellite imagery and public records, mapping approach routes and security systems, running scenarios the way they'd been trained to do in the military. Carl's analyst skills and Hank's tactical experience complemented each other, filling gaps neither could cover alone. Voss's ranch was 30 miles outside Santa Fe, accessible by one private road, surrounded by high desert scrubland. The house was large, expensive, the kind of property you bought with money that came from somewhere. Security cameras visible at the gate, motion sensors likely around the perimeter. Two-person job, Carl assessed. One on overwatch, one inside. Communications maintained throughout. Abort at first sign of complications. Agreed. I'll go in. You maintain position with sightlines on the house. Why you inside? Because if something goes wrong, you're the one who can get the information to Hartley. I'm just the grunt who follows orders. You're more than that. Maybe, but you're the one who knows how to make sense of what we find. I just know how to find it. They rode out on a moonless night, darkness so complete the stars looked close enough to touch. The road to Voss's property was dirt and gravel. No lights except what their bikes provided. They killed the engines a mile out, stashed the motorcycles behind an outcropping, approached on foot. The perimeter security was professional but predictable. Cameras on fixed patterns, motion sensors that could be bypassed with patience and proper timing. Carl set up overwatch 300 yards from the house, night vision and communications equipment spread around him. Hank moved closer, waiting for gaps in camera coverage, timing his approach to avoid detection. The house was dark except for one room upstairs, light spilling from a window that probably served as an office or study. If Voss kept records, that's where they'd be. The back door was alarmed but not sophisticated. Hank bypassed it with tools he'd learned to use in a different life, in different circumstances, breaking into different houses for different reasons. Some skills translated across contexts. Inside the house was what you'd expect from a retired colonel with money. Leather furniture, military memorabilia on the walls, photos of Voss in uniform receiving commendations, shaking hands with generals and senators. A life of service and honor, at least on the surface. The study was upstairs, exactly where the light had indicated. The door was closed but unlocked. Hank eased it open, weapon drawn, ready for anything. The room was empty except for Voss sitting at a desk looking at a computer screen. He turned slowly, unsurprised, and Hank realized the security system he'd bypassed had been designed to be bypassed. This was a trap. Sergeant Cooper, I wondered when you'd figure it out. Voss's voice was calm, measured the same tone he'd used to give orders in Iraq. Took you longer than I expected. 15 years. I thought you were smarter than that. Hank kept his weapon trained center mass. Patterson talked. FBI knows about the network, about Fallujah, about all of it. Patterson is a convicted pedophile trying to reduce his sentence. His testimony is worthless. Voss stood slowly, hands visible, no weapon. But you breaking into my home, that's trespassing. Attempted burglary. I can claim self-defense for whatever happens next. Why? The question came out raw. Why kill your own men? Why betray everything the Corps stands for? The Corps, Voss laughed, the sound bitter. The Corps used me for 30 years. Sent me to wars that enriched defense contractors while Marines died for nothing. Decorated me for loyalty while paying me a salary that couldn't support a family. He gestured at the house around them. This is what I earned. What I took because no one was going to give it to me. You killed 11 Marines. I removed obstacles. They were asking questions about supply routes, about shipments that didn't match manifests. They were going to expose operations that had taken years to build. So yes, I fed you bad coordinates. Yes, I made sure the airstrike hit your position instead of the enemy's. Yes, I let you take the blame. He smiled. And it worked perfectly. You fell apart just like I knew you would. Guilt-ridden, traumatized, easy to manipulate. You never questioned the coordinates because you were too busy questioning yourself. Hank's finger tightened on the trigger. One shot. That's all it would take. End this monster who had hidden behind a uniform and a flag. Go ahead, Voss said, reading his intention. Shoot me. Become the unstable veteran everyone already thinks you are. Prove I was right to keep you in command, knowing you'd break. Carl's voice crackled in Hank's ear, urgent. Vehicle approaching. 2 minutes out. Voss heard it too, the distant sound of an engine. His smile widened. That'll be my security team. I activated the silent alarm when you came through the door. They're former contractors, well-armed, and they have orders to eliminate intruders. Hank had 2 minutes to get out or end up in a firefight he couldn't win. 2 minutes to make a decision, take the shot and face the consequences, or abort and live to fight another way. He thought about Sophie's drawing, about Maggie dying to save children, about doing things that mattered even when they cost everything. Carl, I need you to record this. Everything Voss just said. Get it to Hartley. Already did. Your comms are being recorded. Every word is documented. Voss's smile faded. Illegally recorded. Inadmissible in court. Don't need a court, Hank replied. Just need to know where the bodies are buried. He lowered his weapon back toward the door, keeping Voss in sight. This isn't over. It is for you. My security team will find you before you reach your vehicle. And when they do, you'll disappear, just like Matthew Hartley, just like all the others. Hank ran, down the stairs, through the house, out the back door, into darkness. Headlights were visible on the approach road, moving fast. Carl's voice in his ear. North side along the arroyo. I'll provide covering fire if needed. He ran through scrubland thorns, tearing at his clothes, his lungs burning. Behind him, doors slamming, voices, shouting, flashlight beams cutting through the dark. Ahead, the outcropping where they'd stashed the bikes where Carl was waiting. Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes in the darkness. Carl's rifle answering, not to kill, but to suppress, to buy seconds. Hank reached the bikes, Carl already mounted, engine roaring to life. They rode without lights, navigating by moonlight, in memory putting miles between themselves and Voss's security team. Only when they hit pavement did they slow down, breathing hard, adrenaline crashing. You get all that? Hank asked. Every word. Confession to Fallujah, admission of the network, everything. Carl was grim. But he's right, it's not admissible. We obtained it through illegal entry. Can Hartley use it? To know where to look, officially. To know what questions to ask. To build a legitimate case. Carl paused. But it'll take time. And Voss knows we're coming now. He'll lawyer up, destroy evidence, disappear assets. They reached the clubhouse as dawn was breaking, exhausted and wired, running on fumes. Hartley was already there, having driven through the night after Carl sent him the recordings. He listened to the audio 3 times, his expression darkening with each repetition. This is enough to reopen the Fallujah investigation. Enough to get warrants for Voss's financial records, communications, property searches. Enough to start building a prosecutable case. He looked at them. But you're both in danger now. Voss knows what you know. He's got resources and motivation to make you disappear. Let him try, Hank said flatly. I'm serious. These men don't play games. They eliminate threats. So do we. Hartley pulled up another file on his laptop, hands shaking as he typed. There's something else. Something in Voss's financial records that Patterson's testimony pointed us toward. He turned the screen. A property in Mexico, small compound near the border, purchased through a shell company 15 years ago. Carl leaned closer, studying the satellite imagery. What's there? We don't know officially, but the purchase date matches when Matthew disappeared, and Patterson's records show several high-value acquisitions were moved to permanent locations in Mexico. His voice broke. My son might be there. After 15 years, he might still be alive at that location. The weight of possibility hung in the air, hope and dread in equal measure. FBI can't operate in Mexico without permission from Mexican authorities. That'll take weeks of coordination, maybe months. And if Voss gets word we're looking at that location, anyone there will be moved or killed before we can act. Hartley looked at them directly. I can't ask you to do this, can't officially sanction it. But if someone were to get across the border, locate that compound, confirm if anyone's being held there. You're asking us to break more laws, Carl said. I'm asking you to save my son if he's still savable. I'm asking you to end this the only way it can be ended, by going where law enforcement can't go and doing what needs to be done. Hank thought about Travis and Sophie, about the family he'd failed for decades and might finally be rebuilding. He thought about Maggie spending her last days on things that mattered. He thought about Marcus and the 11 Marines and 15 years of carrying guilt that belonged to someone else. How far across the border? 40 miles outside a town called Agua Dulce. No major law enforcement presence. Compound is isolated, probably guarded, definitely dangerous. Then we'll need help. Can't do this with two people. Hartley hesitated, then made a decision that would either save lives or end his career. There's a third person who might be willing. Someone with as much reason to see this through as you do. He pulled up a photo, a woman, late 40s, Marine Corps uniform. Hard eyes and a harder expression. Captain Sarah Vance, she was in Fallujah with you, lost half her platoon in the same airstrike that killed your squad. She's been investigating the incident privately for years, convinced something was wrong with the official story. When I told her what we found about Voss, she volunteered to help however she could. Hank remembered Vance. Tough, competent, the kind of officer who led from the front. If she was willing to help, they could actually pull this off. Where is she? Arizona. I can have her here in 6 hours. They spent those 6 hours planning, mapping, preparing. By the time Vance arrived, still looking like she could lead a platoon through hell, they had a rough operational plan. Cross the border at night, locate the compound, confirm if anyone was being held, and extract, if possible, report findings to Mexican authorities who could act legally. High risk, probably illegal, definitely dangerous. I'm in, Vance said after hearing the plan. Voss destroyed careers and lives to cover his operation. Time someone returned the favor. They crossed into Mexico just after midnight, 3 bikes running dark along smuggling routes Carl had identified through surveillance satellite analysis. The compound appeared exactly where Hartley's intelligence indicated, a cluster of buildings surrounded by chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Lights were on, guards visible. This wasn't an abandoned property. Someone was using it right now. They observed for an hour, counting personnel, mapping patrol patterns, identifying weaknesses. Professional security, well-armed but predictable. Military types following military patterns. 4 guards visible. Vance assessed. Probably 2 more inside. We go loud, they'll have reinforcements here in minutes. We go quiet, we might get in and out without engagement. What are the odds of quiet? Hank asked. About 30%. Then we plan for loud and hope for quiet. They moved in at 0200 hours, when human attention was at its lowest. Vance took point, moving like she'd never left the Corps, every step calculated. Hank and Carl flanked, providing coverage and security. The perimeter fence had a blind spot on the north side, camera coverage that didn't quite overlap. They were through in 90 seconds inside the compound, committed now with no easy exit. The main building was concrete block, reinforced, the kind of structure built to withstand assault. Barred windows, steel door, a prison pretending to be a residence. Carl worked the lock while Vance and Hank provided security. The mechanism was sophisticated, but not impossible. 3 minutes of careful manipulation and it clicked open. Inside was darkness and the smell of human occupancy. Unwashed bodies, fear, despair. Hank swept with night vision, seeing what his eyes couldn't in the dark. Beds along the walls, figures in them. Young, mostly late teens or early 20s. Too old to be the children from Patterson's photos, but the right age if those children had been here for years. One figure sat up as they entered, male, early 20s, thin, but not emaciated. He didn't make a sound, just stared at them, with eyes that expected nothing good. Vance approached slowly, hands visible, voice low. We're here to help. Are you Matthew Hartley? The young man blinked, processing the name like it was from a different lifetime. I used to be. a long time ago. The weight of that statement hit like a freight train. Used to be. 15 years in this place had erased who he'd been and replaced it with something else. Your father sent us, Detective James Hartley. He's been looking for you since you disappeared. Matthew's face crumpled, 15 years of imprisoned emotion breaking through whatever conditioning had kept him functional. My dad, he's still looking. He never stopped. There were 6 others in the room, all former children from Patterson's network, all sold into this compound years ago, all surviving because they'd learned to be useful to their captors. The horror of it was beyond words. Can you walk? Hank asked. I think so. We're not locked in at night. They don't think we'll run. Nowhere to run to out here. That changes now. All of you get up, get ready to move. We're leaving. But as they were organizing, lights flooded the compound. Alarms screaming. The guards had discovered them probably through motion sensors they'd missed, and now the quiet operation was turning loud. Gunfire erupted outside. Vance returned fire through the doorway, controlled bursts, suppressing rather than killing. We need another exit. Carl found it back door barred from outside, but breakable. Hank put 3 rounds through the lock, kicked it open. Move everyone out. They ran into desert darkness. 7 prisoners who'd forgotten what freedom felt like, 3 rescuers trying to get them to safety before security response overwhelmed them. The motorcycles were half a mile away, too far to reach with this many people. Carl was already on the sat phone calling Hartley. We need extraction. 7 bodies armed, pursuit current position. He rattled off GPS coordinates. How fast can you get Mexican authorities here? Already coordinated. Federales are 20 minutes out. Can you hold? We'll have to. They found defensive positions in an arroyo rocks providing cover sightlines clear. The security team was coming, flashlights and voices searching the darkness methodically. We don't want to kill them if we don't have to, Vance said. These might just be hired security, not part of the trafficking. Agreed. Warning shots unless they force our hand. The gunfight that followed was brief and chaotic. Security team advancing, the Americans holding position. Matthew and the others huddled behind rocks, hoping they wouldn't die, this close to freedom. 3 minutes that felt like 3 hours until sirens filled the night and Mexican federal police vehicles poured onto the scene. The security team scattered, abandoning their posts, disappearing into darkness. The federales secured the compound, found more prisoners in other buildings. 17 total, ranging from late teens to mid-20s, all victims of a trafficking network that had operated in plain sight for 2 decades. Matthew Hartley sat in the dirt, wrapped in a blanket provided by paramedics, staring at nothing. Hank sat beside him, saying nothing, just being present. I don't remember what normal feels like, Matthew said finally. I've been here since I was 17. I'm 32 now, half my life. How do you come back from that? I don't know, but your father's still waiting. That's a start. What if I'm too broken? What if there's nothing left of who I was? Then you figure out who you are now, and you let people who love you help with that. The reunion happened 3 days later after medical evaluations and debriefings and diplomatic coordination between U.S. and Mexican authorities. Hartley flew to El Paso, where Matthew was being treated, walked into the hospital room and saw his son for the first time in 15 years. They didn't speak at first, just looked at each other, trying to reconcile memory with reality. Then Hartley crossed the room and pulled Matthew into an embrace that was desperate and careful and full of 15 years of grief and hope. I'm sorry, Hartley kept saying. I'm so sorry I couldn't find you sooner. You found me now, that's what matters. Hank watched from the doorway with Carl and Vance, 3 people who'd helped write this ending, but didn't need to be part of it. This was a family moment, private and sacred. They left quietly, walked to their bikes in the parking lot. The work wasn't done. Voss was still free, lawyered up, and fighting the charges FBI was building. But 17 people were home alive, freed from a nightmare that should never have existed. Maggie would have liked seeing this, Carl said. Yeah, she would have. They rode back to Arizona as the sun set, 3 motorcycles on an empty highway, carrying the weight of victory and loss in equal measure. The road stretched ahead, endless as always, full of possibility and pain. 6 months later, at a federal courthouse in New Mexico, Daniel Voss was convicted on 37 counts of human trafficking, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and murder. The evidence compiled from Patterson's testimony, financial records, survivor statements, in the Mexican compound raid had built a case even his expensive lawyers couldn't defeat. Sentencing was 20 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. The families of the 11 Marines killed at Fallujah attended the sentencing. So did Matthew Hartley and the 17 others freed from the compound. So did Emma Miguel Isabel. The children recovered in those desperate days when Maggie was still alive. Sophie was there too, sitting between Travis and Hank holding her grandfather's hand. She'd drawn another picture for the occasion, the motorcycles and the people and the children, but this time everyone was smiling, even the angel with red hair. After sentencing, Carl approached the gallery where survivors sat. He found Matthew, first extended his hand. "I'm Carl Holloway. My brother Marcus died in Fallujah. Just wanted to say, I'm glad you made it home." Matthew shook his hand, understanding without explanation the connection between past and present, between his freedom and another family's loss. "Your brother's death helped expose Voss. That means something." "It does now." Outside the courthouse, Hank stood alone, looking at the building that had just delivered something resembling justice. Travis and Sophie approached Sophie carrying yet another drawing. "What's this one?" Hank asked. "It's you and Dad and me, a family." She looked up at him with serious eyes. "Grandpa, are you okay?" "Yeah, sweetheart, I'm okay." "You look sad." Sometimes okay and sad are the same thing. Sophie considered this with the wisdom children sometimes possess. "Ms. Maggie taught me that doing hard things is how you know you're brave. Were you brave today?" "I don't know, I just showed up when it mattered." "That's what brave is," Sophie said matter-of-factly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Travis put his arm around Hank's shoulders, the gesture still awkward but genuine. "You did good, Dad. Marcus would be proud. Hell, I'm proud." The words landed somewhere deep, a place that had been empty for 15 years. 1 week later, the Iron Phoenix MC held a memorial ride for Maggie. 50 bikes from chapters across the Southwest, riding the same route from Flagstaff to Phoenix, where this had all started. They parked outside the Children's Hospital, let the kids sit on the motorcycles, donated money in Maggie's name. Josh was there, the boy Maggie had sat with on that first day. His cancer was in remission. His mother, Sarah, stood beside him, crying quietly as she watched her son laugh and climb on a motorcycle that would have terrified him 8 months ago. "She saved him," Sarah told Hank. "Not directly, not medically, but the money you all donated, it covered the experimental treatment. He wouldn't be here without that. Without her." Hank looked at all the children playing and all the families together, all the joy that existed because one woman had chosen to spend her last days making them count. She saved a lot of people, in different ways. That evening back at the clubhouse, Hank and Carl sat at the bar where Maggie used to sit, her spot still empty, her bike still parked outside. They'd decided to keep it there, a memorial to someone who'd shown them what mattered. "What now?" Carl asked. "Hartley wants us to keep working with him. Says there are other networks, other children missing. Wants to build a task force with veterans who understand the work." "We signing up?" Hank thought about Sophie's drawing, about 17 people freed from the compound, about Matthew reunited with his father, about doing hard things because that's what brave is. "Yeah, we're signing up." Maggie would approve. Yeah, she would. They raised their glasses, toasting the empty spot where she should have been the friend they'd known for too short a time, but who'd changed everything anyway. The road called, it always did. But now they understood what Maggie had known all along, that the road was never about the destination. It was about who you became while traveling it. It was about the people you helped along the way. It was about showing up when it mattered, even when it cost everything, especially when it cost everything. Sophie's drawing hung above the bar, 3 motorcycles and 3 people, and the children they'd saved, watched over by an angel with red hair. A reminder, a promise, a map for the road ahead. The engines would roar again tomorrow. The work would continue. There were children still missing, families, still searching networks, still operating in the shadows. But tonight they rested. Tonight they remembered. Tonight they honored what had been lost and what had been saved, in the thin line between the two. The road doesn't care about your guilt or your grief or your past failures. It only asks if you'll show up when it matters. They had shown up. Maggie had shown them how. That was enough. That would always be enough.